Welcome to Tapped In, our weekly show about creativity, embodiment, and life after unraveling. If you are watching on YouTube, you could see that I am hosting solo today. Midori is off with a cool opportunity that she got, so sending love to her there. And it actually worked out perfectly because today's guest is one of my longtime best friends, chosen sisters, Tammy Visser. I will get to introducing Tammy in a moment. But before we get started, I wanted to let you know that we are in the last week of enrolling the Embodied Care Immersion, which is my flagship container for community service providers looking to develop their personal somatic and spiritual frameworks. You can find the link below. And to apply, simply book a call. I'm really excited to share that we are able to offer way more financial aid than I thought initially possible. So I am inviting anyone who resonates with the message to apply because this group is looking really juicy. And on that note, let me ring us in. You are now tapped in to the soft power frequency. There's always a giggle that comes with that. That's a little protection bell. So I'm going to let Tammy introduce herself, but I want to read off this beautiful bio first because, like I said, Tammy and I have been friends since we were like 15, 16 years old. Today's episode, we're going to get into all of her work, as well as just our friendship a little. Like, what I think one of the themes of the show that has emerged are these relationships and this like mutual investment in supporting one another. And Tammy is a friend that is just a really embodied example of that over the years together. So let me just brag on her first. Tammy Visser is a fitness coach and mental health professional in the New York City market. Traditionally trained in psychotherapy, she spent over a decade working with young people, supporting their overall health and well-being. Born and raised in San Francisco, she made her way to Brooklyn in search of deeper purpose and alignment. Physical fitness has been a huge aid in supporting her personal mental health, which led her to become an NASM Certified Personal Trainer. Tammy coaches group fitness classes in Brooklyn and carries a caseload of mental health clients through an online mental health platform based in California. Tammy is also currently building her own business to integrate her passions for mental health and physical fitness. Yeah. All right, Tammy, how we always start the show is, what are you celebrating today?
Ooh, celebrating. I'm celebrating being back home in San Francisco. I just got in yesterday from New York. And I got to, go pick up my niece and nephew from camp and school. It was just so great. That was a celebration in and of itself. They had no idea I was coming. They had an idea that I'm like, was coming to visit because we're all going on a cruise together, but I don't think they had any idea that it was going to be yesterday. So yeah, that was cute. And this is my first time back in about 5 months, 5.5 months. Yeah. So just celebrating being here.
Yeah, I'm celebrating you being here too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm celebrating that as well. For those who can't tell, Tammy is in my garden right now.
Yeah.
We had a goal of streaming like a one camera thing, but it turns out that needs a little more preparation than I had anticipated. So she's set up in the garden. I'm in my room right now, and I'm celebrating that we're like in physical space. And in typical fashion, we planned to like hang out before earlier, but then we got hungry. So Tammy got food for us, brought it. And so we actually haven't gotten to chat at all yet today. So this is fully raw and uncut as far as that goes. I'm celebrating you being back. Tammy is like auntie extraordinaire. In the bio, you can hear there's this, desire to support children, which is like one of our first, I think, touch points of interacting. I was actually thinking back, Tam, today about how we met, and I don't even remember, honestly. And my take was like, I think that we had mutual friends, and then we both worked at summer camps through the YMCA at different YMCAs, and we ended up on this youth trip to Prague. And I'm pretty sure that is one of the first times we ever actually interacted, unless you remember differently.
Yeah, I think so too. I kind of knew who you were because of some of our other friends, and like I don't know why this pops in my head, but I vividly remember being on the 29 one time going to Stonestown, and I saw you, and but I don't think we had really known each other yet, so I was kind of like, I know who that is, but obviously it was just one of those moments. I know who that is because they're friends with my friends, and but that was it. And then you kind of got off, I think, around probably the Stonestown Y area stop. I don't know. But yeah, and then I just remember the many Filipino parties we've been to in high school. And I don't know where that was. Either that was before or after the Prague trip, but that Prague trip, summer 2008, was one to remember for sure.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Tammy nearly the only reason Tammy didn't get us kicked off and sent home is because the advisors admitted that they didn't want to go home, so they let it slide. Also,
And
that
not to
Muni story
mention,
is really cute, Tammy. You've never told me that before about the Muni story.
yeah, I don't know
That's
why.
really
Yeah,
sweet.
yeah.
And I always would take the 29. I remember like middle school too, always like that line through the Presidio. So just, more cosmic connections that we've always been like swirling in each other's sphere. And yeah, that Prague trip was so funny because it was like this youth leadership trip of bringing all these teens. But I remember Tammy specifically, and this is how I remember, was knowing that you were already in Spain on your own trip. And I like everybody, went on the trip, flew out from SFO to there, but you and was Lana, I think with Lana,
No. Lana had
met you there too.
Yeah,
Okay, so
in
Tammy was
Prague.
like already in Spain on this trip, just straight up partying in Barcelona all summer
I was working on my Spanish. Okay, it was to work on.
Oh, got it. And I just remember being like, that is so cool. Like her parents let her do that. And so she came from like having all this freedom to then being dropped into this YMCA trip where we had hella rules. And the advisors were so frustrated with us because all we wanted to do was party. And that was really fun. So we were like party friends. We're both grew up in San Francisco, which I think if people who aren't familiar with the area, it kind of is a culture that there's no like other towns, like one high school that everyone goes to. So we went to different high schools, but everyone kind of mingled through like partying and things like that. So we have come a long, long way.
Truly.
And that's what we're going to get into today.
Yeah.
So, as I shared with you, the premise of our show is what comes after the unraveling. And when I said that to you right before we hit live, you were like, I feel like I've just unraveled constantly and so many times. And that's hella true. And we've watched each other through that, which is why I think the topic of our friendship came in, is because we've like had this group of friends since we were high schoolers that have all like transformed and lived so many different lifetimes, but we've chosen to stay just down for each other and supportive and to watch each other grow, which is something that I'm just like always emotional and grateful for. So in the context of today, where you're at right now, what story of your unraveling is emerging for you today?
I think another, just as you were saying, all of that unraveling to me, as you said, what comes after the unraveling, I also think about it though as this just elevation, right? Or an elevation, evolution, just transformation type. Because when I think also of unraveling, well, I guess unraveling could be part of, the transformation process. But, I just celebrated my 32nd birthday at the end of last month. And interestingly, or not interestingly, but it's the first time in quite literally what feels like 4 years that I feel like I am finally entering this place of just more groundedness, more clarity, more I guess more confidence in self. And the way I described it to my therapist, and I actually also put this in my like little Instagram post, but it truly feels like I'm a butterfly that has whose wings have finally dried, and I'm like taking my first flight. Like that's really what it feels like, because it feels, the past 4 years truly it felt like I've been in this emotional cocoon. Now, not, and I say that because also I believe I'm also pretty extroverted. I'm also very introverted, but these past 4 years I had made the decision to really take a deep dive into my own personal healing, and just I was ready to start really analyzing, my childhood and my relationship with my parents, with my family, and just kind of enter into this very honest space with self. And it has been quite the ride. So while I may have been in this like, the way I also see it too is like, as I was going out and like dating and like meeting people and whatever, I just had this idea of what I thought I wanted, of like, oh, I want to be booed up, I want to be with somebody, whatever. And I'm like, thought I was so emotionally available. But now, being where I am now, and in retrospect, thinking like, no, bitch, we weren't really emotionally available like at all, And so to be sitting here, reflecting on it too, and realizing, how I think now I am truly much more emotionally available. I mean, in addition, in this past year in particular, well, since the beginning of the year, I also haven't had an alcoholic beverage for like, this is going on 7 months. So that has also offered me an incredible amount of clarity. And, very much part of this, I think has been a huge contributor to my emotional availability. And it's being first and foremost emotionally available for myself, right? And allowing myself to sit in the discomfort. I mean, it's been a crazy like 6 months, like beginning of this year, and there was a lot of hard shit that happened, and there were plenty of moments, and I never really considered myself to be someone that, really leaned on alcohol for anything or whatever, but it was more so just this experiment I was trying to run with myself. And so, but as things unfolded and unraveled over the past 6 months, I through the hard things, I was just, there was plenty of times where I was like, yo, I'd be really down to just take like 10 shots right now to the neck and be like really good. But stopping myself in my tracks, engaging in a, very, legitimately like saying these things out loud to myself of like, Tammy, you're feeling uncomfortable, and these feelings will pass. Like, you're going to be okay. We're okay. Right. And it took current, present Tammy. It's a lot of present Tammy in conversation with little Tammy, right? That's a lot of the healing I think that I've been engaging in is, having conversations with little Tammy, having conversations with teenage Tammy, and present Tammy, pretty much present Tammy running the ship for sure, and just getting to know more deeply what little Tammy needed and what, teenage Tammy needed. And they all got seats at the table, and they all have stories and voices, and they just want to be heard. And I think for me not drinking alcohol, or choosing to not drink alcohol right now, has really allowed present Tammy to be, again, emotionally available, to sit in that discomfort with little Tammy, to sit in the anger with teenage Tammy, because she's spicy and she's definitely angry. But it was kind of a long-winded answer to.
No, I love it. And it actually is funny because as you're talking about this journey, kind of this year, this commitment to abstain from alcohol, I'm thinking like, oh my gosh, the first story we said is like us partying together, and
Yeah.
thinking about how that was such like, and I think both of us share this, that we didn't necessarily have like addiction struggles with alcohol, but it was just kind of baked into the life. Like
Yeah.
it just was what it is. Like I think I learned this more like growing up in a city. I feel like we're exposed to things a little sooner, and it's always just been fun. It's always just been like, this is harmless. And what's actually coming to mind right now is kind of making the link of like something that has been on my mind, and something that we also said we might talk about today, which is our identities as biracial, as mixed race people, and how I've been thinking lately about kind of the positioning of when you're not in the extremes of something, and how being like in the liminal space, always being in this kind of in between, kind of pushes us to more intention, because we haven't been forced
Mm-hmm.
to do any of this. We haven't been
Right.
forced to like confront alcoholism. We haven't been forced to confront like extreme experiences around race. We've kind of just always been in the liminal neutral of observing what's going on. And to me, and I think I talked about this last week actually, in terms of like even coming from a family that has like the liberal democratic politics, and how not coming from such extreme backgrounds kind of put me like at a level where I could see more that was like, there's still an issue here. It doesn't have to be so extreme to still spot that we can get further in intentionality and integrity. And I think about that in our positioning of like just being in the mix of space. That's just like, there is kind of more of a agency that we have to take for ourselves, or that we kind of have the opportunity to take for ourselves.
Yeah.
That's not forced on us. That we're like, okay, nobody thinks like me, looking at you, like you sharing all of this. I'm like, I've never in my life considered Tammy to be the person who needs to go on a healing journey, like you've always had that baseline level of understanding of like how to respect people, interact with people. And so it's just, to me, it's like another level of cool accountability for yourself that you kind of took in. That's like, no one's shouting this at me, but I could do more. I could take this further.
And I think too, I think it's as, the multiple levels of unraveling that have taken place over the years of, the short 32 years that I've been on this earth, right? Like I think about, and I know, Siobhan, you're big on ancestors and, calling them in, talking to them and engaging with them. And, that's definitely something I want to do more of. But even for me, just on the very almost like surface level of it, understanding where, my ancestors have come from, and how not only are we're, and I think actually, Siobhan, you and I have talked about this a lot, where we're like, for so long, my papa, my mom's mom, and my gung and my mom and her sisters, for damn near their whole lives have been in survival mode. And so, I think about, as frustrated as I can get, of like, well, why didn't they do this? Or why didn't they, like, they all need to go to therapy. I mean, this is a fact, like, definitely they could benefit from it, but like, would they engage with it in the way that could benefit them? Who knows? But like, I see my role, again, as the unraveling has taken place over the years, as like, as someone who has been given this opportunity, this privilege, the space, the courage, the self-awareness to tap in and to like, really work through a lot of the shit that they've all been through, right? Because it's not just mine, right? It's all
Mm-hmm.
very much been passed. And now, while I may not know all of the history and where my papa and gungun came from and what their life was like, I mean, shit, just through being raised by majority of my mom's side of the family and being around them, I feel it. And I
Mm-hmm.
know there's something, right? Like it's, something of like, I mean, there's a lot of pain, right? There was a lot of like hardship, and I don't know the details, nor do I think a lot of my aunties and my mom know the details, but um, I feel it. I know that there was a lot of hardship.
Yeah.
Um, and what I think has been so beautiful to witness, though, too, on my mom's side, is that as chaotic as they are and their upbringing has been and how much they've been in survival mode and still to this day I think are, um, to a degree, um, what has always also been felt is their love for each other, right? That has been their saving grace, is that they go towards each other, and you know there's been so much joy and love for each other, and that was always felt. And I think now too, in this space of the unraveling that I'm in currently, I'm now have the space to be more in the joy and to be more in that love, because I, for so long, again, really referencing these past 4 years, because they have felt so much like they've been focused on the pain and the hurt and the harm, while unintentional, the harm was, but the reality is that, yeah, like as much love and joy as there was also a lot of harm and a lot of pain, and that that dichotomy is just something that was really hard and still is really hard to hold and to sit with, and um, to be in, especially with people that you respect and love so much. I mean, parents is just
Yeah,
so layered.
totally. And I think that was the hardest part about when I first started therapy, was there is this like initial lifting of the veil where you see and you first break away from your parents as, the we knew they weren't perfect always, but like,
Yeah, yeah.
the concept that we had of them, that was the hardest part for me of when I started therapy, was coming to terms with, like you said, the dichotomy, the duality, that
Hmm.
we can be so loved and still experience so much harm. And it was like hard to look at my parents. It was hard to engage with them because
Oof.
when I first started, it was like, oh my gosh, like this is what's been going down this whole time. And I've been so kind of disillusioned to that. And it takes a really long time to like eventually swing back and be like, all right, I'm in a place of safety in my body to confront more of these things. And so, like, as you being a therapist, like, the way and like everything you named about the inner children, how I've been thinking about healing a lot lately is as time travel, where I'm like, to
Oh,
me,
yeah.
so, this is kind of based in like polyvagal theory. That's just like when we get to the place of safety in our body, then we can wander to things. So, are you familiar with that like ladder of the vagus nerve kind of? I can like give a
Um,
brief.
yeah, give me a briefing.
Yeah, yeah. So I want to shout out the fairy god sis Flo, who has her master's in public health around this and taught me a lot around the vagus nerve. But it is our like largest cranial nerve that like wraps around your brain, down the spine, around your organs. And the concept is that there is this ladder of act. This is a very, very simplified version. If anyone who's an expert on this is listening, like we basically, the concept is that there's kind of like this ladder, and when you're at the bottom of the ladder, it's like shut down, where you're disconnected from other people, kind of symptoms we would understand as like deep depression. um, the middle part of this ladder is more like activated trauma response, like kind of shows up more like we commonly understand anxiety, like problem solving, like I'm in action, there's something wrong and I'm actively trying to like mitigate, and that's the trauma response. And then when you're at the like polyvagal um, or parasympathetic nervous system place is when you actually feel safe. You're experiencing safety in the body, you're experiencing connection to other people. And what I learned from flow was that vagus, VAGUS, means to wander. And kind of the theory I've been developing for myself is like only when we're in that safe state can we wander into healing. Can we wander into these stories of our families, of our inner children? And to me, going into that space is kind of like, it's almost like the safety opens up a portal where I can travel and like tie up these other timelines with my inner children, with my ancestors. And that is like the state of where healing for me happens. And so that concept I've been thinking a lot about is like, I'm time traveling back to another timeline to talk to, like you said, like our inner children, those inner teens, hearing what they want, giving it to them, or telling them that it's safe. My friend Jazz kind of told me, like, why don't you bring your past self to your timeline and let them hang out with you? Like you're like a cool auntie, like bringing them along into your life. And like this ability to wander with our minds and imagination can like really give a lot of healing power.
Totally. And this idea of safety, that's something that has stuck with me from when I first started this like 4 years ago. And shout out to my like favorite therapist, Layla. So
Love
great.
her. I worked with her for a
Love
little
her.
too.
And I remember going into her office one morning and it was like, I don't know, talking about definitely unraveling. I was unhinged. And I was like,
Oh, Layla has watched us both unravel.
and I'm like, what took me so long to get here, to this point of like, God, like just kind of this fed up with self and like, but also just readiness, and she had said, you're finally at a place where you feel safe with yourself. And I was like, oh, wow, to have arrived at a place of safety with self too. I also, again, I acknowledge that is a privilege. That is to feel that safety just within my own body and in my own being. I mean, it's not something that everyone gets to feel. And I say that too because my my mom and my aunties, and I don't, just seeing the way that they move and they behave and the decisions they make and whatever, it's like not wanting to even address certain things that are, that have happened in their lives. It always, that line always kind of sits with me and replays in my brain of like, I don't think they feel safe within themselves, and yeah, just feeling safe enough to take yourself to those, deeper depths, and knowing that you're going to hold yourself there and hold yourself there in safety and with love and care, and that we are going to be all right. We, meaning all versions of self. And
Yeah,
yeah, I always talk about myself as a we, because they're all there. There's so
yeah,
many of us. Yeah.
totally. And I really am thinking too around, yeah, like our parents. I had this situation yesterday where my mom was experiencing kind of like, what did she call it? Like a premature heartbeat or something, some kind of heartbeat thing that allegedly is normal and common. And it's so difficult. And I would love to hear your insight on this as a mental health professional, because you have the doctor saying this is normal, but the experience is that it feels unsafe in her body. So it doesn't matter whether it's normal or not. Her experience is that this is terrifying.
Right.
Everything's changing. She has all these layers of disconnection of safety in her body. So even trying to explain that with her, that's like, that condition is normal. So let's work on your sense of what's happening, your experience as it happens. It's just so many more layers of difficulty to access that for people who've been through more trauma than us. And that's why I think we are in these positions as care providers, to help guide people to peeling back the layers, because it's a somatic experience. And
100%.
something that I'm curious about with you, knowing that, you know, you studied psychology, you became a counselor and a licensed therapist, and all, you've had this like intellectual understanding for such a long time. Can you think about the turning point where you changed your approach? Because I want to get into your journey becoming a personal trainer and this like physical experience. Because like you've intellectually understood a lot of things for a very long time, but you're saying like only 4 years ago were you like, hold on, I have something here too. What was that journey and like experience like for you?
Totally. I mean, I'm gonna start by saying it's not an accident that I think I became a therapist.
Totally.
Just with like how I think about more often positioning in my family, um, just also my nature. And I think when going through grad school, to get my master's in counseling, I like, it wasn't in my program. It's interesting because there was two masters in counseling psychology at USF. I went to the University of San Francisco, and the one that I did was the school counseling track, which also was a dual concentration in professional clinical counseling. The other track, or the other degree in counseling psychology, was just I think the LMFT, like marriage and family therapy
Mm-hmm.
track, where I think part of their program, they were required to be in therapy, or as a part of, you know, their journey, whatever. My track though, we weren't. And I'm like, ooh, I don't know how like ethical that is. So I didn't really, and I mean, I was just also very busy. I was in school full time, I was working full time, I had an internship. So I was like to the brim, just like nonstop doing things. So, and I remember saying too, all through grad school, and once I was like coming up on the end of it, I was like, God, I can't wait to get into my own therapy. I'm just like, I was looking forward to this. And then I, you know, landed a job, the exact type of counseling I wanted to be doing, which was a school-based mental health therapist at a public high school here in San Francisco. And as I was entering the first year, getting acclimated, situated, whatever, you know, I started to think, gosh, I'm not in therapy. I don't know. And I just didn't feel ethical doing my job. How am I providing these services when I have not, like, when I'm not in therapy, right? Like I had my first like more like formal therapy in 2017 when my ex and I broke up. And that was a quick 6-week little stint. And I think that was like covered by my insurance. So that woman was also trying to get me, like, she was very clearly trying to like get me out of her caseload. And I was like, in retrospect, I'm like, okay, whatever. But also she just wasn't a good match. But yeah, so then as I was going through these, you know, early years after I graduated from grad school, yeah, I was really wrestling with I'm not doing my job ethically because I'm not in therapy, and I know that there's a lot of work that I need to do. And but then I started to grapple with how am I a mental health clinician who can't even afford her own therapy? Like that is
Mm-hmm.
still something that I just like frustrates me, right? Because being in therapy too, it is a privileged ass thing. It's a luxury to think, you know what I mean? But also now being more into the profession, it's like the way I just get into the systems, right? Of like the way our society is set up, we don't clearly value mental health like we do physical health. And
It's an individual solution.
right. So it's very frustrating because that was something that I grappled with for a very long time, and what I did let kind of get in my way of going to therapy, because I was like, God, this shit is so expensive. Um, and I like am literally what felt like making pennies, and I'm like, what are we doing? And so, but that was something that I talked about with Layla, and it was just a lot, that was worked through. And, it's still, again, something that I think about, but, I'm so glad that I did do it, and I'm here, to analyze it and to reflect on it. And so then once the pandemic hit, fast forward to me completing my 3,000 clinical hours, because after grad school you have to go and complete 3,000 clinical hours. Me being the mental health counselor at a public high school in San Francisco was my clinical work. And so that was right around the time when the pandemic hit. And I had also, I vividly remember in summer 2019, I was like, I was on a trip to New York, and for the longest time I was like, oh, I don't think I could ever live here. I'd visited multiple times. And I was like, it's too big, it's dirty, whatever. And then like something about summer 2019, I don't know what it was. It's definitely where I was personally, professionally. I was wrapping up the 3,000 hours. I was just feeling ready, and my mom's health was kind of in a steady space. And I was like, I got this feeling, and I was like, I gotta move here. I just got moved, like energy overcame me, and I was like, I gotta move here. And so it was a year in the making. And so, like I said, the pandemic hit, and plans kind of got put on hold, but then, whatever, I went and did it anyways. And so I quit that job, took a break from therapy and from everything, and moved to New York, had 7 months to land in New York. And to really, so talk about like another point in the unraveling, right? Where I, for the first time when I'd quit, or was finishing up those 3,000 hours, I had also been reflecting on the fact that up until that point, I was always working towards something. Like I always had a goal of, predominantly was education, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like surrounded, by education, or around, excuse me, it was around education. So whether it was, getting my bachelor's or getting my master's, or then getting the 3,000 hours and then getting licensed, like those were years in the making. And I was also like, I don't know what I'm going to do. I don't know. And I was also at a point where I was like, I don't know that I want to start my own practice. I'm also very tired. I was, working community mental health, and was exhausted for
Yeah.
more reasons than one. And yeah, so it was for the first time in my life where I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do. But I also knew I needed a break. And so, because not only was I working, studying to professionally care for people's mental health and well-being, but I was, outside of that, I was also caring for my friends, caring for my family, caring, for my parents, and making sure that all, their stuff was taken care of. And while they may not have seen it in that way, that's also, I mean, I know that was a burden that I took and put onto myself, right? But it's like,
Mm-hmm.
I am also rooted in filial piety. I don't know if that's how
Yeah.
you say it,
Filial piety.
but and I just have been raised that way. And it's not even just my parents, it's all my elders I just hold in high regard. I think they have, as they should be. But anyway, so I took the opportunity to quit and to go do something for me, and to like put myself first, and working through that whole 7 months where I like didn't have anything. There was, talk about a roller coaster, like trying to land and figure my shit out. There was a lot of insecurity, a lot of freedom, but also getting, just falling in love with taking care of myself and just
Mm.
living, and easing into the day and cooking myself breakfast, like going to work out maybe whenever I wanted to, and like, and just living and exploring my neighborhood, walking around, like all the things. And I was like, God, this is great. I was like, how do I? And that's when I also really started to reimagine what my life could look like, because, you know, coming from always working 9 to 5 and da da da, and that was also something that was pushing me towards like, this ain't it. Like, this is not like it for, I don't think this is it for me. And so to also be in New York, Brooklyn specifically, you know, we're in Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn specifically, right? Where there's a lot of creatives, a lot of people living life outside the box. I was like so inspired, and I still am so inspired every day, where you have people who are dabbling in a million and one things and are enjoying life and they're okay. And I'm like, wow, I love that. And I'm like, you know, so then 7 months, the end of the 7 months came around, and I was like, oh, the savings are running out. We're no longer getting those government checks. So I was like, I need to make some money. And then I did a short little contract gig at a hospital for like a few months, and then it was my 30th birthday, and then I was like, oh god, I don't know what I'm going to do. I need to get another job. And I'd always been curious about working in restaurants and the restaurant industry, so an opportunity came up there, which is I still work at that restaurant 2 years later, which is crazy. And so I was like, this is cool, and I'm like making good money on like hardly any hours. I'm like, how am I making more money pressing buttons on a screen and clearing tables than I was as as a professional? Yeah, I'm like, huh, that's interesting. And then, you know, I also signed on with this online mental health platform that I still also work for, that serves teens. So I'm still carrying a caseload with them. And then in summer 2021, yeah, I got the gym that I had been going to was this high intensity interval training gym that I really enjoyed. And the owner had approached me and was like, hey, have you ever thought about coaching or teaching these classes? I was like, honestly, I have, because, you know, I've always been active. I've played sports and my whole life. And
Yeah, you've always been at the gym.
yes, I've always considered myself an athlete and whatever. So yeah, I was, and I've always been interested in combining the two, the mental health and the physical health. And because going to the gym has, or just being active, leading and living an active lifestyle has always been super supportive of my mental health in a place, you know. And I learned early on, particularly when I first started at the high school, where it was like the first 2 weeks, I remember it was the end of the first 2 weeks of on the job. And I remember I came home and I just felt so heavy, and I was like, oh, what's going on? Like, why do I feel this way? And I just broke down crying. I was like, what is happening? And I was like, oh yeah, Tammy, because you literally have just spent, within the first 2 weeks, right? I'm hearing stories from these children of things that they're going through, things that you know, a lot of people you wouldn't even, day-to-day human may not have been through, whatever. And these are like 14, 15-year-olds telling me these stories and things that are going on in their world. And I'm just holding it, right?
Yeah.
Like holding it and needing, and not, and that's when I realized this whole like self-care took on a whole new meaning. And that's when I really started to pick up going to the gym even more. And as a place to just release and to like let go of all of that. Because it is energy, right? Our emotions and the stories we hear, it's a vibration, it's an energy, we're picking up on it, whatever, and that needs to be moved through. And so anyways, back to how I then started. The owner of the gym that I was attending lit the fire into my butt to go get certified. So I did that, worked. Then that became like the third job that I was doing, and incorporated that into the rotation of, you know, what I'm doing now. And I've definitely there's been some shifts over the past 6 months with that. But yeah, it's been a really incredible journey so far. And I'm getting, I think, closer and closer to, you know, more balance for sure through the three things that I'm doing. And I finally feel like I have 2 feet on the ground in New York, which is awesome. And yeah, things are looking really good at this new gym that I'm working at. Like, again, putting me more closer and closer on this path of really incorporating the physical health and the mental health. Yeah. And just being able to support people in that way.
One thing that is coming to mind as you're telling this story is just how tapped in you are with your intuition. And you said earlier, like, you know, I use a lot of ancestral language. And I think part of why I am happy and excited to have you on here is like Midori and I talk a lot about embodiment through our spiritual practices, but it doesn't need to be so literal sometimes. Like, to me, you're someone so deeply embodied and doing the same energetic hygiene through the way you work out, through your rituals, through taking the time to make your breakfast in the morning and making that like a non-negotiable. And I remember when you moved to New York, wondering and having this actual like surprise of, she just worked through doing all these hours, and my thought was, and she went to a state where she can't use that. Like, this is what I've known Tammy has been working at for years and years, and being like, whoa, like she just said, I'm out, I'm following this call. And I think for people who maybe are in traditional routes, who haven't thought about this yet, it could be so shocking to be, and even like the word, and this is like a projection of my own self, of like the selfishness. Did you feel any, or did you feel that projected onto you by anybody, that there was like any selfishness for you as a person who gives and gives, to be like, I'm out of here? Because I also know you were caring for your family's health and you were like giving everything. And honestly, as long as I've known you, I feel like you always tended to be in like long-term relationships where you were giving a lot. And that was, you know, like, I think of you when I think on that sense of like, I kind of forgot in the last few years, but when we were younger, like, you did have these like relationships that you were so loyal to and pouring into. And even your work is like so, you know, morally good. That's like, oh, she's helping the kids. She's holding space for all of this. And for you to then stop and be like, you know what? I'm still of service, but I'm of service to me, and to follow that call. I think many of us who have that same like disposition to be caregivers and service people, talk ourselves out of doing something like that.
Oh yeah, 100%. I mean, those first months, I mean, there was a lot of guilt. There was a lot of like low moments. And it probably wasn't until, again, literally beginning of this year, where I think I had finally gotten to this place too of having grieved my life here in San Francisco, who I was, the things I was doing, and just everything that San Francisco is to me. And knowing that, you know, every time I come back, or even if and when I decide to come back, it's just not going to ever be the same. And, you know, all of that was just, ooh, that was a lot for me to hold, and, you know, and to work through and to process. And going from seeing my parents every day to not, you know. And I had a moment literally a week ago, and I don't know, I was on the train, and I had a call with my mom, and it sparked this just feeling of like, damn, like I don't talk to my parents that much anymore. It's just so different, and that just made me sad, you know, or that I like also don't have, you know, this type of relationship that I you know, that I guess, quote unquote, fantasize about having with my mother, whatever.
Yeah,
And
we've talked a lot about that.
yes. And so a lot of, you know, and just being reminded, I'm like, oh yeah, that is something we are sad about. That's a wound that needs a little more of my attention, I think. So like I said, yeah, going from the life that I was living here in San Francisco of, yes, making sure everyone is taken care of, that I'm like, everyone else is so top of mind, being now removed from it and being finally again feeling like I've landed in New York, I think is also part of just this whole, yeah, journey of like unraveling for a while, and grieving who I was, grieving that version of Tammy, and also holding like space for myself to feel that, and to yeah, to be present with that, because and I think being in New York has really offered me that space though as well, right? Because I have had a lot of time alone. I mean, to be able, vividly remember too, being so many times I'm just like laying on my couch for like just hours to rest, looking up at the ceiling, whatever I'm doing. And I'm like, God, just being in that moment to lay on my couch unbothered, like I could not even have to talk to anyone for like a whole day, hours, whatever, to just be with me. It was foreign to me. I didn't know what that was like until I moved to New York. That was,
Which is so ironic because
right?
everyone moves to New York to like be around and be
Yes, right. And like it's been quite the place of solitude for me. And like I have also had people ask me, it's so funny, I've been asked me this recently, of like, do you have any friends? And I'm like, I literally laughed. I was like, I don't think I've ever had someone like so explicitly ask me this question. And
That's so hilarious.
And I laugh because I'm like, yes, I have friends, but it's like I also like my socializing has really shifted as well to being more virtual. And I think because my social world is so fulfilled through my community here in San Francisco and people abroad. And I mean, I have now, yes, made new friends. Like,
You have friends.
I'm also very social jobs. Like I work at a restaurant a couple days out of the week. I work at a gym. Like I'm constantly in contact and socializing with people. So yeah, it's just funny, and just how my world and my life has really shifted in this time. But it feels good.
Yeah, I see the difference. Yeah. It's like I said, like it's not something that myself as a friend was, like you weren't a state of crisis. Like there's people that have been in our lives who are like, oh, they really need some help. They need to take some time. And you, like, I just love this, that like you've undergone this like self-accountability that is so, just to me, it's just so embodied. And so what I wanted, like, as you're talking, honestly, even you just storytelling through it, I'm learning so much that I didn't know. And even that question of like, do you have friends, and the concept of friendship that so often is around like friends being those people that you talk to every day, that always know what's going on, that always know what your job is and all these things. And our friendship, like, yeah, to a degree we have that, but I think it's always been kind of, and this is, I'm going to bring in human design because we're both human design projectors. And what, for those who are new to that, and I am not super versed, but I know enough to know that projectors kind of have this like outside looking in view. I had a reading with a wonderful reader named Elise Preston, who depicted it like the rainforest and was like, the projectors are the birds at the top of the canopy that can see the whole picture. And so you've touched on this in so many ways, like
you see the picture of your family's needs. You see the picture of what's wrong with the traditional mental health career route. You see the picture of what's missing in personal training, and you're like synthesizing. And I think it's such a projector thing to do, to like take two things and like fuse them in a way. You doing that with like mental health and physical fitness. I did that with my career as just like spirituality and childbirth. It's like we're seeing this perspective. And the flip side to that is that it inherently requires an outsider positioning. We wouldn't be able to see these things if we always fit into the group. And I think that, we got at One Wakefield in the comments here that all of our connections and friendships have been rooted in is we have this beautiful friend group that everybody has individual relationships, more of a group dynamic for those of y'all that, Wash House crew, that still is rooted in this deep like loyalty and willingness to choose and support one another. That doesn't require like the day-to-day like need to know everything that's going on with each other's lives, but just like this knowing that we're there. And like you said, like, that you are leaping into the unknown from a place of knowing that you have this like support group that no matter what happens, we know we can always come home. I'm going to cry now because I'm just like, wow, like we do know, and that has truly empowered me to take so many courageous acts. Like, I haven't talked about it on this show that much yet, but when I went through in spring of 2021, getting pregnant, and it's funny, it was your house, actually, you were in town where, oh God, I didn't think I was going to talk about this, but, I found out I was pregnant. I was already married and had a child. And so my conditioning at that point was never considering that it would be a possibility to not carry that pregnancy. And so I told my friends like almost immediately. And I remember being at your house. You must have been visiting from New York.
Yeah.
And whenever you come home, like everybody goes to Tammy's house. We got the barbecue going, like the family, like that is like the culture, I think, that I'm learning now the older I get is not as common. And that is a culture that your family has like brought to us. I think Nina's family has brought that to us. That's just like this chosen family dynamic where we know each other's parents and uncles and nieces and nephews. My son and your niece are little besties. And like, it's like we've already been world building this world that we've wanted to like live in. And I don't think I knew how radical on a wider level our approach to friendships and family have been like since we were younger. And so I remember being there, people asking me what's up. I'm like, oh my God, y'all, I'm pregnant. And I'm just like free flowing into this. And as I'm hearing myself talk, being like, oh my God, I don't want to be pregnant. Like, and then working through that and being so freaking terrified. And part of my fear in that was actually the fact that I had already told so many people, because I always thought that an abortion is something that was like, like it is personal, like so personal and secret. And that I was like, in that moment was like, fuck, I got to tell my friends because they all know I'm pregnant now. Like I've got to like be courageous in how I approach this. And like it really knowing like the love and like the trust that I have in these longstanding friendships, I think it really empowered me on another level to approach my pregnancy like radically different in a way that I never saw for myself as a married mother. And that is what catalyzed me ending my marriage. And I think that was only possible knowing that like my friends had my back, that I didn't have to, the day of the operation, like Ani came and like dropped off food. Like Aaron was texting everyone, hey, like this is what's going on with Siobhan. And I didn't even have to ask. And I just trusted that. And to me, that is kind of like
it's just a praxis of what I like, why I want to share on Tapped In, of why I feel it's important to like for us to be visible and show people what's possible when you are vulnerable, when you're willing to have tough conversations, when you're also refusing to throw people away when there's conflict. Because like y'all can imagine when you're a group of girls from when you're high school, like there's conflict. There might be years at a time where people are at a distance and come back together. And so that is part of why I was really excited to have you. I have just chills right now because it's like not realizing that this was actually low key like a queer imprint for me of what chosen family and a different approach to relationships could be like. And it's just so fun sometimes. And like, it's kind of like, I don't even really think of it that way until now. I'm like kind of observing. And the more I relate with clients and learn how their families and friendships are kind of set up. Like, you know, I have a, you know, polyamorous client that tells me about these things and I hear about platonic life partners. And I'm like, oh, I have those. Like those have always been my friends. My friends, we've always known we wanted to live together and like be on the block and like, you know, like to me, I'm like, we've so normalized it that I just want to like show that, shine that light out to people. That's just like, there's possibility when you're willing to work through creatively. I don't know. I feel like it's like creative solutions. So that brings me to that was leading me down the road of this creative solution back to what you named around therapy and you realizing like you should be in therapy. Why don't we have money? Why don't we have therapy money? And that was something I realized recently, a few months ago, was me feeling like I'm holding a lot of this space. I need to be back in therapy. I don't have therapy money, and hitting you up and being like, hey, would you be down to hold space for one another? And I kind of just want to get into that. And I also want to hear your input too, as a therapist, of like just these like, I would love your insight as a therapist on kind of like the narrative that that's unethical to support. Like, what do you think the boundaries are? Like you're a licensed therapist. So like I could see other people doing this like space holding for each other. But what I'm kind of getting at is like, I feel like there's this culture of fear that we've created around the conversation of therapy, of scaring people that we shouldn't be holding space for certain things and certain topics unless we've had the 3,000 or 30,000. How many hours was it?
3,000.
Okay, I was like 30,000 kind of sounds like a lot.
Like, yeesh.
3,000 took long enough. I'm like,
Yes,
I remember you sharing, I'm like, Jesus, you haven't hit 3,000 hours yet.
Yeah.
There kind of is this like, to me, thinking in like my very anti-capitalist fashion, of course I know there's like a function, and that's something that I like really want to explore, and that I am exploring in collaborations and building together, how to model this code of ethics and accountability that still keeps people safe while not saying there's kind of like this punitive threat around like leaning on like this should only be handled with the therapist. Like I say in every clip, I am not a therapist. I am not a mental health professional. I do not offer advice. So what do you think that like boundary is? And what do you think the like, and I also would want to hear why that's so important too, from a therapist perspective.
I mean, I think first and foremost, you even disclaiming that's a great boundary. That is not enough people who are out here, especially in this age of social media and you know, whatever, making everybody a fucking expert. Excuse me. I don't know. Yeah.
Yes, you can swear.
Okay. I was like, but making everybody a fucking expert on all the things, which sure, by all means, I'm not discrediting the fact that people's life experience
it's like
valuable.
the balance of like, yeah, it's very valuable expertise, but also where is the line?
Sure. And I that is something that I honestly was grappling with, like, another thing I was grappling with over these past like 6 months too, of like, as I'm thinking about how I'm gonna even move forward in creating the space of both the physical and the mental health realm. I'm like, because yes, I am licensed in California, and if I'm starting to offer services, where are the, if I or even start to label myself as like a mental health coach, right? Or just the vocabulary that we're using and I mean, I'm thinking, because of my training and my background, of course I'm thinking the legal and the ethical, right? Because I do have a license, that could be compromised. And so, yeah, and especially for someone who has valued traditional education and pursuits, and I love it. And I do feel a way about it at the same time, but I think also for me, what it is and the way that I view it, it does just, the training is more like this, it's just a standard, right? That we can, and I don't know, maybe credibility also. And I think, which can make some people feel more comfortable, and knowing the types of training. Now, of course, I'm also not naive to the fact that just because someone is licensed and has all these fucking letters behind their name doesn't mean that they're good at what they do, right? At all. They could be, some crooks out here, and there definitely are.
Totally are. I've had therapists that I'm like,
I mean, even a lot of the kids that I see, and hearing like how their experiences have been with prior therapists, I'm like, oh my God, what? Like, they're saying those things to you? Like, or that's what they said, or that's how they're approaching it? It blows my mind. And so it's no wonder why there's also, I think, a stigma around mental health, because there's like really shitty therapists out there. And yeah, so I don't know. It is, I think, something that I'm still trying to also figure out, what the boundary is, and what I believe and what I think about it. But I do know that, and I can only speak for myself, right? That I am so grateful for the path that I, went down. And sure, I'm $75,000 in debt, but I'm like, I wouldn't trade it for anything, and I can be very critical of it. And I just, and again, I'm very grateful for it, because it also really, it was more like, so what kind of expedited and spearheaded my own personal healing journey, and has really challenged me to, start healing parts of myself, right? And the reality, and one of my professors, who I will forever quote, but I think is just so great, is like, you can only take your clients and people, and this goes not even just for clients, this goes for all relationships, right? You can only take people as far as you've gone yourself, right? And
yeah.
And so I think about that a lot, and which is why I didn't feel fully ethical doing my job when I wasn't in therapy, because I was like, damn, I'm asking these people to do a lot of things. And I feel this way similarly as a coach, as a personal trainer, right? Where I'm like, I want to be able to take myself through this workout, because how am I going to ask them to do it if I can't even do it myself? Like, that's not fair.
Totally.
Or it's not fair.
That is part of just like the colonial framework. Like, that's something we've talked a lot. And I think that soft power as a whole is really trying to explore, is like a new ethical standard, because it's so colonial to think that, just like you said, filial piety, these like hierarchy relationships, teacher student, parent child, husband wife, like like it's just so baked in that we are like often unable to see it. And so I have a question that's like a twofold question, which is like, what would you say to a licensed professional who has done everything by the book, as well as what would your message to them? Because to me, what's clear throughout everything you shared is that you have your own code of ethics that you go by. No one told you, hey, it's not ethical for you to not be working on this. You were like, oh, like I feel this, and it's not an awareness that everyone comes to.
Right.
So And I think what a lot of people will say is like, well, I'm not required to. That's not required of me. What would you say to somebody who is like really by the book? And then on the flip side, what would you say to someone who is like just doing everything? You know, there's so many reasons why people can't access systems. And this is something I learned a lot in birth work with doulas, was like certification. Like it's a access barrier to some of the healers that do the most important work. People who may be, for so many reasons, you know, just I won't even go into them. But what is, I would actually say is like, what is the value of considering, I don't know what to call it, like a renegade approach? And then also, what is the value of a licensure and certification? Like, what is the value of that institutional route for you?
I think for me personally, is just, I think, offered me a little security, and a place to start.
Yeah.
Really. And
yeah, like it should be the starting point, not
yeah,
the cap and standard that you're done and you're good. And I think that is a problem that we see a lot of times, is like they get the certification, I'm good to go, and there's no continued sense of accountability unless there's, you know, like regular like relicensing or whatever is required.
And I mean, and it's interesting too, because I remember when I was thinking about what I knew I wanted to go back to school for something. I didn't know what, but I was, you know, I knew I narrowed it down to like a few things that really interest me, which was like physical, like just fitness, education, I think like food and travel or something. Those were like 3 things that I was like looking into.
I'm pretty sure you're a 9th house sun is in astrology, which is, to anyone who knows astrology, it's so clear. Like the 9th house is like higher education, travel, philosophy.
And so my thinking was like, okay, Tammy, which one of these is going to also give you a solid foundation to where you can then branch out into all of the things that you want to do? And I chose education, or like mental health, right? Like obviously I chose that route. And yeah, so I think of it as that, right? As a place to start. And there's, I think, a lot of value in that. And I think there is, while traditional psychotherapy is, of course, deeply rooted in white men, just philosophizing,
theorizing,
and, you know, and most of the time was trying to, I think, figure women out, or say like figure out our crazy, which is like bullshit, whatever. You know,
I think we should have another conversation eventually on women being crazy. You've supported me a lot through that. That's another convo I want to have.
Yeah. So I think that route is important. But as far as like, I guess the more renegade route, I guess that's what I would tell the renegade route, is that it's just the more educational, you know, or whatever traditional educational route is. It's just a place to start. It's not an end all be all.
Yeah, it's the access.
And for those who are like very by the book, I mean, for myself, I think that's also what I've had to get out of, right? And still trying to just live. I mean, I think that was a big part, what I've gained so much about moving to New York and taking that leap of faith, right? Of just, I was finally feeling safe enough and ready to like start trying to live my life outside the box a little bit more, that I'm like pushing myself to get out of my own head, even though I live very much in my head a lot. To this day. So yeah, it's almost like message to myself of someone who is traditionally by the book and whatever, is like, fucking loosen up a little, like live a little, like go and experience shit, like go do the thing that you think is hella woo woo or whatever. Like there's merit and there's value there too. and to not poo-poo something, or, you know, before you even tried it. Like, how you won't know unless you try. It's the like, back to our camp days, like, don't yuck my yum. Like, don't do that. Like, don't do that. That's not fair. So yeah.
Love that. And
Love
it's
that.
it's like just the same answer for both. Like, it's a starting point and it's just a starting point. Like,
Right.
that's it. Like,
Right.
and I think, you know, that is a theme of everybody that has come on the show, is like people who set that high goal, reach the pinnacle of their field, and then felt that, like, this isn't enough. Like, this isn't it. This ain't it. Like, we
But
gotta live
also,
by a new standard for ourselves and hold ourselves to a higher standard, because we can't expect institutions built on white supremacy to have a standard that's going to serve everybody, women, people of color, everyone really, besides cis white dudes. Like, you know, I think
yeah.
that is what's beautiful about it, is like, that's what I want to explore. That's what we do explore in here, is like, how can we raise our standard for our own selves and answer to a different authority that is not just police and what was determined legal or illegal? How can we hold ourselves to a different ethic and level of accountability to one another?
Right. Right. And I think by, and, you know, embarking on, you know, these personal journeys, you know, for me too, even looking into it as my journey to become a therapist was very selfish, right? In retrospect, of wanting to get to know myself more and to be of better service to other people, right? And I think something else that I kind of came to realize too is, through helping other people, I'm helping myself, right? So it is low-key selfish, but I also see it as, more deeply, I also am, I feel very passionately about, to your point of just, I want, by working on self and by you know, embarking on that journey, it's an opportunity. So not only are we elevating self, but that in turn is elevating us as a collective. And
Yeah.
so I'm like, it's the symbiotic relationship where, you know, is quite
And I think
valuable.
that's the piece of, like, Western therapy that I, like, am excited to see emphasized more, because to me that was like, when we silo our problems into an only individual setting, which that's important to be heard as an individual, but if it doesn't eventually connect back, like, I remember saying that to Layla when she was my therapist, like, Layla, like, how can I see all these things and still carry on talking about systems of oppression? And she was like, you can't. Like you just, like, you know, there's nothing that there, like, to me, she's an embodied therapist because she's willing to say, yeah, this is the limit of where therapy goes. I can't help you cope
Yeah.
with capitalism to beyond your own, like, yeah, like, beyond holding space for those feelings. But at some point, to me, I even think that, yeah, like, Western therapy is, I think it has a ceiling, and that at some point it needs to get back to the collective, reframe us back to the collective. And, like, we're always going to need that individual support, but also ground us in the understanding that the only way that we're going to get out of this is if we all understand the system at hand and lift each other however we're doing it.
Well, right. And I think it's something that I've also, I'm feeling more, because I've gone on more of an individual journey again these past 4 years. Now I'm like, okay, yes, Tammy, let's go now out into the world and let's put this shit to practice, because
Yeah.
this next level of healing comes from community. We're social beings. Like, we need each other. We learn from each other. There's so much healing that takes place in relationship, in community with
Yeah,
people.
we are intertwined whether we choose to be or not.
Right. I mean, even through so much of what, you know, we've already talked about, of just even our community here in San Francisco, or that we've created, you know, without us even knowing this is what's happening, you know, we are helping each other heal by
Mhm.
just holding each other. And
Yeah. And I think
in
that's
more
like the
ways than
perfect way to
one.
end that, because we're healing, like seeing you be such a like active healer. I'm out, I'm active, I'm taking clients, to then say, actually, the best way I can serve is to just embody and know who I am and be that base vibration in the room and for my family and for my friends of what it means to just be like still, and showing by that example that actually like being of service is so much simpler than we're taught a lot of times. It could literally just
Right.
be sitting there listening and holding and co-regulating.
Right. Well, and that's, that's so much too of, when especially kiddos that I talk to are like, God, I wish I could just be there more for her. Like, what do I do? How do I do this? Or even the parents that I also work with, right? Of maybe forgetting or not realizing the weight of just showing up, being present. Like,
Yeah.
you don't need to say anything, just
Yeah.
be there. And I again, Brene Brown has taught me that, right? The difference between empathy and sympathy is just empathy being like, I'm gonna come down there and sit in the shit with you. We don't have to talk about it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna be there and feel it with you, and we're in
Yeah.
this together. That's it.
Yeah.
Like, and there's, again, not, there isn't always, I think it's getting comfortable with those. I talk about this a lot too with my kiddos, is right, like, you're creating, how can we develop relationships with these more challenging emotions that we feel, these big emotions, the sadness, the anger, the frustration, all of that, right? We're so quick to, myself included, we're very quick to run away from, especially for me, it was anger, right? I hate feeling angry. It doesn't feel good, but it's like, but her voice matters. She's angry for something, right? Like, how do we get to know them better is like, okay, let's sit with
It's an
it. Let's
unmet
get
need.
curious. Right. Like, what is it? And just getting curious, staying curious first and foremost with yourself. Why am I feeling the things that I'm feeling? Well, also with anger and sadness, let yourself feel it. And, then when you're in a more regulated state, then we can like reflect, then put that, the piece is reflecting and going back of like, okay, what made me so sad? What made me so upset? And really, trying to approach it with as little judgment as possible, because we're human, and that's just so much a
Observing
part of the
without
human experience.
judgment, I feel like, is like the biggest first piece, is like, how can we literally just even look at it neutrally? How can we like, look at it without the need to fix and just like observe?
Right. And I think though too, like, that's where my zooming out and seeing all the shit is like, we're taught that like, you're a little bitch, or it's like, it's to feel sad, or to feel like, ooh, vulnerable, like it's not, that's weak. It's like, no, so much of what I'm doing, and like even telling people, I tell myself this too, it's interesting how much the things that I'm telling to my kiddos are also messages to self, right? Of like, vulnerability is a strength. I don't care what anybody says. It's hard. It's hard to be vulnerable and to talk to people about some of these really hard, big emotions, because we're taught to suppress them, to not feel them, and to kind of run away from them. So we learn.
I want to leave
a lot
it
of
there
unlearning,
on
a lot of learning.
Be vulnerable, folks. To me, I like have said this before, to me, vulnerability has just been an invitation to receive love, and it's been a breaking past that like illusion of aloneness. And I am, constantly vulnerable, because every time I share a vulnerable story, I invite in somebody to connect with me, whether that's my intention or not. Every time I share something on Instagram and I have people like DM me, and it's so incredible, because I, as someone who shares a lot on Instagram with a smaller platform, a small but highly engaged platform, I notice that the things I talk about, people don't even feel safe commenting that on Instagram, as if someone might witness them in that, which is totally fine. They go to the DMs and they send it to me, and I have like all these conversations with people being like, oh my gosh. And I'm just like, yeah, like shame and secrecy, like to be vulnerable is to like free the shame and free the secret. It unloads every time. Like even just now talking about that abortion story where I'm like, I have this hesitation, but now I'm like, it's released. It's done.
Yeah.
It's out. Like that's it. And so I want to leave it at that on vulnerability. And I want to ask you a couple fun questions because I have here truth or dare for couples. Because I got this as a stocking stuffer for 1 year for Christmas, and I want to just ask some of these fun questions. And on a fun note, okay, so Tammy. Oh, okay. This is kind of a dumb one. How old is too old for dating?
How old is too old for dating?
Yeah. And why would this be for couples?
I don't think that there's an age limit on that.
Okay,
I think
cool.
you should forever date your partner or whoever. Doesn't even have. I mean, dating.
They're talking about the age gap, like how old is too old for you and someone you're dating.
Oh,
You're like,
okay.
I don't think
like,
the limit does not exist.
I don't know. I mean, I guess I've definitely, I wouldn't say I dated this person, but I mean, I've like, whatever. I've like hooked up with people who are like 20 years my senior. So maybe 20 years.
Cool.
That's a lot, but.
Yeah, doing the math, I'm like, a lot, but reasonable.
Yeah.
Have you ever skinny dipped?
Yeah, probably. I mean.
What is the silliest thing you've ever done to attract someone's attention?
I don't know if you call this silly or confident, but maybe it's both. I did this one. I've done the like, you know, where someone's seeing you, seeing them. I literally used that line. I went up to them. I was like, I see you, seeing me, seeing you. Like, what are we gonna do about it?
Ooh,
Like, are we gonna?
I never heard that one. I'm into that.
So it was a little cringe, but I was like, fuck it. I'm feeling moved.
This is my favorite last question. When did you realize that you really liked me?
This is the moment on the 29 bus. We didn't even know each other, but I felt drawn.
Love at first sight.
Yes.
Oh, actually, I want to ask more. What's your biggest turn off?
Oh, I think. Oh God, I don't know if it's biggest, but I mean, just top of my head, it's like, I'd say like a pessimistic outlook.
Yeah, I'm with
on
you there.
life. Yeah, it's not cute.
And final question. A lot of these are sexual. What is the sexiest thing about yourself?
Ooh. God, I haven't really thought about that.
No, I'm like, I'll answer. I think the sexiest thing about you, Tammy, is your trust in yourself to go on an adventure. Like going on adventures together is so fun always.
Yeah, I like that.
Well, we'll leave it there as lovers and friends. If you tune in with us, thank you for hanging in the life of Siobhan and Tammy, certified since, I don't know, 2007 or something like that, 2008. How can people find you, connect with you?
Just Instagram really right now.
Yeah.
But
if you're in Brooklyn, especially, Tammy is really on the local, doing a lot of workout. What do you call sessions, events?
Yeah. Out and about. Yeah. Come hang out.
Well, thanks for joining. I'll see you in 30 seconds outside of the store.
Great.
I love you so much.
Love you too.
Yeah, we
Thanks for
are
having me.
Soft Power. Give us a follow on YouTube, Instagram, get on our email list. And if you want to be an early supporter of the show, you can donate to our coffee. We're fundraising right now for the care immersion to continue to be able to bring in all of these service providers and healers who want to expand and live by this, ethic of self-accountability and connection and radically breaking out of the standards we've set that are just no longer good enough. So we're out and see you next week. Next Wednesday, we have Genevieve Diaz, who is a Filipino-American film director, and we'll see you then.
Cool.